Let's get the latest on that WADA announcement this morning, the news that came through just a couple of hours ago. Here's Neve. G'day, Neve.
Morning. Good morning, Virginia. We have heard from WADA this morning that they are going to appeal the AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal's decision on the 34 past and present Essendon players. We've since heard from WADA as well, and we can show you a statement just from WADA very recently that they released. The Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority welcomes the World Anti-Doping Agency's decision to appeal the AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal's ruling in relation to the 34 former and current Essendon players. They went on to say that ASADA will fully support WADA in its appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Let's hear some of Essendon's response so far. The club's chairman, Paul Little, spoke on Triple M earlier this morning.
You know, our belief was, Eddie, unless there was new information of some sort based on what we knew, and we now know the basis for the not guilty finding, by the tribunal in particular, the emphatic finding, that we'd be okay unless there was new evidence. And at this point in time, we don't know if there is. It's unlikely, I would have thought, but we really just, it's too early to know.
And we should hear more from Essendon a little bit later this morning when they train. To find out what the process will be from here, Paul Horvath, a sports lawyer, joins us now. Paul, good morning.
Good morning.
We've been waiting to hear what action WADA will take. We know now that they'll appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. What does that mean? Where to from here?
OK, so firstly, the Court of Arbitration for Sport doesn't need any incorrect decision to be appealed against. So the case is what's called de novo, which means it starts from scratch. So that means any evidence can be called, anything can be put before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Secondly, there are 3 arbitrators who sit to determine this case. Each party, so on the one side you've got the players, and obviously we know that there were separate legal representatives at the first hearing. On the other camp, if you like, is ASADA and whether or not AFL are involved. So those 2 sides get to choose 1 arbitrator each. And then the Court of Arbitration for Sport itself appoints the chairperson who will preside over the case.
And what legal authority does this Court of Arbitration have?
So essentially, when all sports were required to adopt the World Anti-Doping Code, and this also flows on to whether there's any further appeal, they had to agree that the Court of Arbitration for Sport was the ultimate authority in terms of anti-doping matters, rather than having different courts making different decisions, whether it's a Supreme Court of New South Wales. Right. That can't happen. So this hearing is it. There are no further appeals, and so by all sports agreeing to the World Anti-Doping Code, they also agree that the Court of Arbitration for Sport is the final authority.
And does this forum, this court, hand down sanctions and punishments?
Yes.
And they're binding?
Yes. So that'll be a 2-step process, namely that in the first instance determinations as to guilt or innocence will take place, and obviously that key phrase of comfortable satisfaction will come into it again, and I should just say that that relates to a decision between beyond reasonable doubt at the high end and the balance of probabilities, and the thing is that that's a matter of interpretation, and so it may be that that is what the World Anti-Doping Authority in Canada is relying on, arguing that the original AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal got that interpretation wrong.
Well, yes, and it's Paul Little was saying that it was an emphatic not guilty, but that's not quite the case here, was it? It was just that the AFL Tribunal found that it couldn't find them guilty on the evidence, because you've got this other confusing aspect where Stephen Dank's been found guilty of some matters.
Look, I think it's both ways. I think that because I haven't read the decision, and from what I've heard in the media, the comments seem to be that it's a fairly strong decision, and the reason I say that is for a couple of reasons. The first is that you didn't have a number of key witnesses attending at the hearing, so particularly Nima Alavi, the compounding chemist, Shane Charter, who sourced the original chemicals over in China, and Stephen Dank, who allegedly supplied and injected the chemicals into the players.
They couldn't be compelled.
They couldn't be compelled, and my belief is that that will remain the case at this further appeal hearing, which is a major flaw in the case. So in the absence of that material and with the comments made by the AFL's anti-doping tribunal that those witnesses had given, as I understand it, self-serving statements and had made comments that in their original statements to the ASADA interviews couldn't be believed. Okay. It suggested quite an undermining of that key aspect of their case.
Can WADA, in this particular forum, the tribunal, can they compel people to attend? Can they compel them to give evidence?
I don't believe so,
right.
Because this is an arbitration. We know that in the first AFL Anti-Doping Tribunal hearing, they went to the Supreme Court, that is AFL and ASADA, seeking to compel certain witnesses, and what they were bringing the action under was the Commercial Arbitration Act. The CAS hearing is an arbitration, so I think the law must be the same. Those witnesses couldn't be compelled, and there was no appeal by ASADA to any higher court to say that the judge got it wrong. So I can't see now how those witnesses can be forced under any new legislation.
Which makes a difficult case for WADA ultimately, doesn't it? We do not have a positive drugs test, and they may not be able to get those key witnesses to attend the appeal. So what do you think WADA has based this decision on?
Look, it's very difficult to say, Neve, without getting more information from them. I guess on the one hand they may simply say, look, it's a very important case, it's very closely followed around the world, and we can't simply let it go because it's of such significance. They may even, and we don't know, believe that they've got a tough case in bringing the appeal, but think that, look, for the good of the sport, we need to run this case, even if we're aware that we're a better than not chance to lose. It's important that we have a go and that we be seen to be protecting the integrity of sport.
Well, then, do you think we will get some more answers from this appeal? Jobe Watson said after the previous decision that the team, the players, still did not know what they had been injected with. Do you think this WADA appeal will give us some answers to those questions?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think that's what it's about. The case is about whether or not there has been breaches of the AFL anti-doping code, and it's not so much about finding out the truth and this sort of thing. And the other thing is that in terms of how the appeal operates, the court simply wants to know about this comfortable satisfaction and not so much those sorts of answers.
And will the players be able to continue playing while the appeal is heard?
Yes, because they're innocent at the moment. That status quo doesn't change.
Paul, thank you for joining us on what I'm sure has been a very busy morning for you.
It's a pleasure.